Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Reina Hybrid Wash Processed Guatemala from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Manhattan, based out of Rotterdam, Netherlands. And this is our first Manhattan review of 2023, as they're one of our most featured coffee roasters on this channel. And a lot of the reason for that is so many consider them to be one of the best and most innovative coffee roasters in the entire world. And what caught my interest about this coffee is that it shares a very similar flavor profile to the Kianjege, a wash-processed Kenyan coffee that we'd previously reviewed on this channel. And given that that was one of my favorite Manhattan coffees of all time, I'm very curious to see how this one turns out, as this right here is day 34. And recipe we went with for this coffee is a little different from our standard Manhattan recipe. A 16:1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I definitely like this one better through the V60, which typically indicates a more medium fine grind. However, I actually went a little bit more fine on this one as well. Now, in terms of roast profile, Manhattan is a very light roasting coffee roaster, and while this isn't necessarily the lightest coffee I've had from them, I still think a lot of people would consider this to be on the even more light than a normal light coffee. So this is a very light coffee in general. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 13, first impression, and as I kind of alluded to, the cup did come out very light in terms of any sort of vibrancy, but it also had a fair bit of a grainy quality to it. And that can be something you experience with a lot of their natural processed coffees, but in this case, that's basically the first impression I had from this cup, as there wasn't anything too defined present within this early experience. There was a little bit of a vintage Manhattan brown candy component that was in the background of this coffee, slightly more subdued, slightly sugary, but for the most part, just an okay first impression, as I didn't get anything too distinct from it. Day 15, ran it through the Chemex for the first time, and there really wasn't much of a change, as the cup continued to feel just very light in general. Likely needed an extended bit of rest because it just had a very light flavor profile to it. Sugary on the forefront, slightly herbal, and a little bit more of that brown candy on the back end, but not too much else worth discussing on this day. Day 17. The cup started opening up a little bit as it remains very light in terms of the vibrancy. However, there's a bit more of the dark sugary soda component to it, even if it is in slight moderation. Cup is not overly bright as it feels moderately candied today with a slight improvement. So I'm seeing very slight incremental improvement. I felt like there was going to be a lot of things that could be opened up from this coffee. Day 20. Interesting day. This was a surprisingly good day. So I had some unusual brewing circumstances. Given that the coffee hadn't been that good up to this point, I actually just used a hand grinder and some very hot water. I think it was just straight boiling at this point because I had very limited utensils to use on this day. And the coffee turned out wonderful, as it had a wonderful dark sugary sweetness to it. And when I was using the hand grinder, I looked at the grounds and I noticed that it had been too fine, that I had ground the coffee too fine. And as a result, the entire coffee, in theory, should have been awful, but it actually turned out to be the best it had been. It was a slight bit more robust, but there was so much more sweetness in it, including the listed berry sweetness. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing wrong. I need to go back, increase the temperatures, and go a little bit more fine. And that's exactly what I did, as there were just great qualities to it on day 25. Had been struggling a little bit to replicate that day 20 experience, but I knew that I just needed to keep tinkering with it and go a little bit more fine, as on this day, after an extended cool down, it's starting to open up in terms of that candied sweetness, which is a lot of what I was getting from that day 20 experience. It's still slightly herbal, but a lot more sweet in general. Day 27, best day of the coffee to this point, as I finally hit that mark. I think the extended rest is helping this coffee improve as well, as it is the best it's been up to this point on this day as well. With the adjustments, the abundance of dark sweetness is much more present in the cup. Reminds me a lot of cherry soda at this point. Reminds me actually a fair bit of Kianjege, which is exactly what I was hoping for with this coffee. An abundance of sugary sweetness, and now I'm getting that trademark classic Manhattan brown candy in the cup as well. So it has exactly what I'm looking for, and I'm really enjoying this coffee. Definitely coming out as much of a guilty pleasure with this one as the Kianjege was. Day 29, same adjustments to the previous day, and the coffee continues to remain wonderfully sweet and clean. So that grainy component I'd experienced in the earlier days, completely gone at this point. Another sugary soda-like day. Once it does cool down, it opens up so much. You get so many of the candied components to it, as well as the berry components. That Manhattan brown candy sweetness is in significant abundance, cleanest it's been up to this point, and the closest coffee I've ever had to what I would describe as a cherry soda, between a combination of the sweetness, the candied sugariness, I'm thinking that caramelized component, as well as the herbality to the cup. So a lot of depth to it in terms of going with that sugary component. And for that reason, I was really enjoying this coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and we have a lot of level 4s. So let's go through those real quick. We will start with the body at a level 4. And I think that when I drink this coffee right after it's been brewed, it feels like it has a lot more body and texture to it, because as this coffee has cooled down, it doesn't quite have that same texture. I would probably lower that down to a level 3, and maybe I should have waited to make this tasting wheel, because the coffee tastes so different right after it's been brewed up to the point where it's cooled down to room temperature, because it just gets so much better the more you let this coffee cool. So body level 4, probably generous, probably more of a level 3, but after it's first been brewed, it does feel like it has a fair bit of texture to it. Cleanliness, level 4. Yes, this is actually a very clean coffee, especially for what it is. The hybrid wash processing, I looked it up, and I'm not going to try to explain it, but essentially it does have a little bit more fermentation to it. Even then, it doesn't sacrifice any of the clarity, as this maintained itself as a very clean and clear cup of coffee. Finish, level 4. Yes, it's not overbearing in any sense, and it actually finishes quite well, given that it's such a wonderfully sugary finish to the cup. So I like that being there at that level 4. Sweetness, also at a level 4. Both the finish and the sweetness are actually on the slightly higher side of level 4, as it has such a wonderfully sugary, sweet finish to the cup. So I like those both there at the level 4, but given that they were slightly higher, that was a nice selling point to me on this coffee. Acidity, level 4. Yes, it has an interesting brightness to it, very reminiscent of Kenyan coffees for me. So I can see that acidity at the level 4, and I think that kind of goes in line with the berry that we have here, because it did come out as that kind of more slightly tart, dark berry, but also very cherry-like. So I like both of those things, because those definitely remind me of Kenyan coffees, the Kenyan coffees that I enjoy a little bit more. They do have a currant note listed on here. I want to say it's black currant, but they also have cherry soda listed on here. So I can see both of those things in significant abundance, so I really like the berry fruit there. Actually probably on the higher side of level 4, and it's much more of a sweet side of things. A couple of level 3s. We will start with the spice that is alluding to the more herbal component within the coffee. It definitely has that, and I think that's what gives it that sort of soda-like feel to it. Typically that's what you experience when it comes to coffees that have soda notes listed on them, is that they're insinuating there's an herbality to it. So I like that spice there at that level 3 mark. Citrus fruit, level 3, that's an interesting one, because they do have a grapefruit note listed on here, and it's one of those things that you don't necessarily pick out right at the start. I actually had to think about it while I was making this tasting wheel. I'm like, am I actually tasting citrus? And it's what that bitterness is within this coffee. It does remind me a little bit of a grapefruit. I could see it. It's a slightly more bitter citric component to it. So I see it. I think it's one of those things where once I think about it, I was able to feel it in abundance, but it wasn't one of those things that was glaring at the forefront of this cup. And then caramel, level 3, that's probably my favorite part of this coffee. It does have that classic Manhattan brown candy sweetness to it, and that's been present in some of my favorite coffees from them all time. The Chantilly, the first ever coffee we reviewed from them, as well as the Kianjege, and there's some other coffees we've had from them, and whenever it does have that trademark Manhattan brown candy sweetness, it makes it one of my more enjoyable Manhattan coffees. This one definitely had it. So I think that's about it for the tasting wheel. I don't think that there's too much else worth discussing on this one. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I really enjoyed it. I think that's been pretty clear up to this point, as it did remind me of one of my favorite Manhattan coffees ever. And these are the types of coffees that made me really enjoy Manhattan in the first place. This is one of their more standard offerings, and every so often they hit it out of the park with one of their more standard offerings. And I mentioned the two coffees, the Chantilly and the Kianjege, which turned out to be two of my favorite Manhattan coffees that I've ever had. And this one right here could fall in line with that, as well as for a coffee that's relatively cheap. It came out with wonderful sweetness as well as wonderful clarity and great fruit-like components to it, all of which were very candied. And that's the type of coffee that I will enjoy, even if there wasn't too much florality present within it. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. It's interesting. I think it did remind me in a fair bit of Kenyan coffees, the more sugary Kenyan coffees. But I think if you really like your sugary soda sort of coffees, this one has a little bit of that in terms of the herbality as well. Has just a lot of berry components to it as well, and it maintains a bunch of clarity. So if you're willing to work with this one, make a couple of adjustments here and there, then you get a very sugary sweet coffee, which is something that I will always enjoy. I think for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, we'll love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you enjoyed the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Reina Hybrid Wash Processed Guatemala from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.